Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, ABC.
Good morning and welcome to the regular council meeting in town of Qualicum Beach. I want to acknowledge that we are holding this meeting on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, in particular Qualicum First Nation. With that, I'll call the meeting to order, and the first item is the agenda. There's a change from page 52 regarding the grant application, so we'll deal with that as it comes up. It's a minor adjustment. I think most people have that green sheet in front of them. So any other changes to the agenda? Then the agenda as amended is approved. Then we have the consent agenda. It's the correspondence log. Anything that needs to be removed from the correspondence log? Councillor Skipsey?
Well, there were two items that came up for me. One, I would like to pull the item of the outdoor cat monitoring and place it under correspondence on the agenda for the next meeting. I have heard from multiple people on this issue, and I'd just like to bring it forward for discussion. And also, I would like to pull the correspondence regarding the pollinator pathways. And that would be with the intention of referring to staff for consideration and comment, if that's appropriate.
Yes, both letters can be on the agenda under correspondence for next council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
So anything else under the correspondence log? Then the correspondence log is also adopted by consent as amended. A recognition, as you know, King Charles, or he will be King Charles officially on Saturday, and the Legion is holding a celebration of that to mark that occasion. There will be the town crier who's going to do a special town cry, which will always end with the Majesty the Queen and how many years she was in office, and his will be the inaugural year. So anybody who wishes to join the Legion around 2 o'clock is welcome to it. That's it for as far as we're concerned, but I think it is notable to be mentioned. Approval of the minutes. We had the April 12th and April 19th council meeting minutes. Were there any errors or omissions? Then those minutes are approved as by consent. Business arising from the minutes. We have a select committee on the environment and sustainability, and there's a notice of motion. Councillor Skipsey.
I'd like to move the motion.
Thank you. Seconded. Councillor Vander Valk. Discussion. Oh, Councillor Young.
In the workshop that you're planning for the Environmental Sustainability Committee, because it is such an important conversation for all of us, I would like it to be more open to the public, or inviting the public to at least come in to listen on this topic. if we can do some more advertising in that.
Councillor Skipsey.
That actually was a discussion at the meeting, whether or not we should just do it amongst the committee members or whether to open it up to the public. And in the end, it was decided that to go with just the committee members. There is a lot of knowledge and expertise on the committee, and we thought maybe by opening it up, it would just maybe grow legs and get bigger than, I don't know. I think the preference was, the recommendation was to go with just the committee, but.
Okay, but it will be open to the public to observe.
Yes.
And as happened in the past, often when there is an interest, the chair can ask anybody from the gallery if they have any comments or questions. So, okay, thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, just briefly, it might be good, like it doesn't have to be now or in the meeting, but just maybe just in the future, next little while with staff, just a brief rundown of some of the things that are going to be discussed. Just because there's certain things that are directly in our powers as a local government where we can have a lot of impact, and certain things where we have no control whatsoever, which are vital issues, but we're just the wrong level of government. So it might be good just to make sure that we're not, if we're going to have a half day on this topic, it's not talking about everything. It's trying to keep it within the parameters of where we can actually have an impact as a local government. And that'd just be more for staff with council and or the public too. And I don't know how it would best be done. I'm arching my eyebrow because I don't know. But I just think that'd be my only request is like, I think this is a great idea. Just as long as it's related to the things where we can actually do stuff and not talking about everything under the sun.
Yeah, I think I would call that a friendly notice.
Yeah.
Councillor Skip.
Yes, that was actually discussed at the meeting as well, and there was 4 different areas where it was identified that the committee and council could take action, and one was advocacy, so that's on the things that are bigger than us, and some was on administration, so those are bylaws and those types of things. So yes, that was definitely part of the conversation.
Thank you.
Good to hear.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? If any, carried unanimously. Thank you. And then there is another one regarding the Select Committee on the Beach Day celebration. Councillor Skipsey, seconded. Seconded. Councillor Vander. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? If any, carried. Thank you. And then we have the streetlights, and perhaps we should put the map on the overhead. This was the so-called figure 18, where there were comments from some folks who thought the whole area should be changed out. But I walked the area east of Primrose, which is Hornby, Denman, and the light on it says 508. If you look at the kind of the right side of the screen, there is number 508, kind of in the middle of Hornby. That one was requested to become a 39 watt, 3,000 lumen, and the other one, 518, which is on the corner of Denman and Primrose, was already identified. Those are the only 2 that I have. And I also met with the folks on Pekin Place, and they agree that it's not on the map, but on Pekin Place there was one that was some uncertainty about that. I went to that location, and the neighbors agree that it should be also 39 watt. Councillor Skipsey.
Yes, so Councillor Vander and I walked to the other side, the west side of the streets. So 509 and 510 have already been approved for replacement. 511, there was one of the neighbors, and I will just comment that generally people were neighborly. So they're like, well, you know, it doesn't really bother us, but if one of our neighbors is negatively impacted, then we're fine with changing it out. So that was the case with 511. 513, there was a preference to keep it as is. But then 514, 515, and 516 would all be changed. So the motion that I had come up with, that the following lights identified on figure 18 as included on page 22 of the agenda be included in the first intake of the replacement program: 508, 511, 514, 515, and 516. And I would move that.
Thank you. If I could amend the motion to include 508, then we got the full package. You put it in there? Sorry, I missed here. I didn't hear that. Thank you. So that's the motion, and the second, Councillor Vander. Discussion. Councillor Young.
Sorry, was 510 and 509 included and 506?
5.9 and 5.10 were in a different figure, like a different page. They had already been adopted for replacement
In the previous list, yeah.
in the previous meeting.
Okay, and 506 is also included.
Just turn your microphone on for a second.
Sorry, 506 is also included? I'm looking on page 22.
Yeah. No, I went to the house adjacent to 506, which is right on the corner of Hornby and Primrose, and they actually prefer the light to stay the way it is.
I did walk it at nighttime, and actually 509, the gentleman just happened to be outside on the corner there, and he said he loved the light. But as I walk further down that block on Valdez, mid-block is actually where this whole figure 18 came from. They actually invited me into their house, and they said, come and see, from their bedroom and then also from their living room. 510 and 509, even though it isn't adjacent to them, it really shone in like a beacon. So they are on the list. And then we also walked 506, and just outside along the street there, and it's not so much light trespass into resident, but it was the glare in your eyes when it's raining and you're driving. You're not able to really look ahead because the light will shine in your eye. You'd end up looking at the hood of your car. So I know it's considered an arterial corner. The conversation is, check how many cars come in there at nighttime. We're there for a couple of hours, and 2 cars. And the comment was also brought up to me that we have an arterial route on Rupert going to the airport, and that's not even lit up. So can we also dim 506?
Okay, well, I went there. That was part of my territory to canvass, and the gentleman there said, no, we really like the extra light. And I know sometimes when it rains, they have sometimes a concern, but he felt that it's a corner, and people walk there, and we should keep that light. So that's why I didn't put it on the list. Thank you. So with that, Councillor Skipsey.
Well, there was just one other thing that's come up, and it's been brought to my attention that as a local government, we have the authority, apparently, to define light trespass. And BC Hydro...
Councillor Skipsey, can I just finish the lights, and then we can deal with that separate issue? So on the lights on 18, Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, just my one question is through the chair to staff. When we sort of had the original resolution, we didn't really take a moment and actually say, okay, for the total implementation of everything in this resolution, because it was all collectors, I believe, and it's there's a very large number of lights. I'm just wondering, because we had $100,000 allocated in our budget for this, are we running up close to that $100,000 total, or for that first round? Because I know BC Hydro had a finite number of lights. They're letting us get at $500, and then the rest would be, I think it was $1,250 or $1,700 or something like that. So I'm just checking that, budgetarily, this is something that we're okay with.
Thank you. Councillor, Ms. Varela.
Yes, so thank you through the chair. We are anticipating the lights council identifies as of today's meeting date to be replaced at $500 per light. The second intake runs till August, so we are currently within the allocated budget amount. It depends on what the second intake looks like, and we're anticipating those lights to have to be replaced at the advertised cost of $1,750 per light. So currently within budget based on this intake. And Your Worship, respectfully, before you close off the discussion on this, could I just get staff to read back the lights that are identified before you take the final vote?
Ms. Skipsey, if you would read your list.
Okay, so it was 508, 511, 514, 515, and 516.
Okay. All right, ready for the question? Councillor Harrison.
And just briefly, I do support the work that people are trying to do to try to address these issues, because I know some people have legitimate concerns, but I still feel that some of the liability issues which were identified when we earlier discussed it, not to rehash all that, haven't been adequately addressed. So I will be not voting in favor of this, but I do approve of the efforts to try to ameliorate the impacts as they are.
Thank you. Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Harrison opposed. Thank you. And then you had something else you wanted to add.
Right. So I was mentioning it has been brought to my attention that as a local government, we have the authority under a bylaw to set limits for light spill and light trespass. And so I understand this could be quite a large undertaking if we wanted to go that way, but because BC Hydro currently doesn't have a definition, and my understanding is that some other municipalities may have this in a bylaw, I would like to look at it as perhaps an option for regulating it going forward.
Thank you. If I could ask that we would bring this up when we deal with our 2024 strategic plan, I think because it will take some work. So I'll just defer that,
Okay.
if it's okay.
Sure.
Defer it to the 2024 strategic plan. Councillor Harrison?
Well, I was going to add too that if there are other communities who've already done that, having those examples would be great for everyone to have prior to that conversation. But 2024 is a ways off, so obviously it's not a conversation happening tomorrow.
Thank you. Councillor Vander.
Yes, I just wanted to reiterate that we had decided at the last meeting that we also would ask BC Hydro to address not only changing the lights, but any other adjustments at the time that they are changing the lights out. So I just want to make sure that that is conveyed to BC Hydro, and apparently there are shields that are available. So, if we can look at that as well.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we did confirm there are no shields that exist for this type of light. We did get BC Hydro on the phone with the mayor in attendance to actually clarify that that is a non-issue for this type of light. It isn't available. BC Hydro will install the lights to specification. We did highlight that council had put forward that resolution. They do have specifications for standards of light installation. If there were individual cases that had to be referred to BC Hydro Design Department, there would be additional costs incurred, but we could bring that matter before council if the change out of lights as directed to date doesn't achieve what you're trying to achieve.
Thank you.
In looking back on the lighting situation, it was offered available by BC Hydro to change it out within 3 to 4 weeks. And for right now, for BC Hydro to want to charge us so much and then on the second intake twice as much, it just really seems unreasonable. Hopefully we can still negotiate that. Also about the lighting shield, yes, Councillor Vander, it is available. It's just that one of our local residents forwarded me an email that they got from lighting support at BC Hydro. So this is a BC Hydro contact. The email they got back to him when he inquired about the bright lights. He said, "Thank you for your inquiry regarding the new LED streetlights in your community. The LED streetlights wattage and color in the town of Qualicum Beach were based on selections made by the municipality. BC Hydro is not offering shields as part of the streetlight replacement project, as the new lights are designed to be flat in the housing with a more focused light beam." So I don't know why we're having trespassing light issues when they say they have a more focused light beam. And they also say, to date, BC Hydro has installed 85,500 LEDs without the need for shields. I know other communities have also asked for shields, so this statement is contrary to what we know. Should the town determine the changes to the lights that are required, the following options are available. reduce the voltage with 39 watts being the lowest intensity, reduce the color temperature from 4,000 down to 3,000 degrees Kelvin. That's what we're going for. They also said, angle the luminaire up to 5 degrees on the pitch and roll axis. And also they said, rotate and/or extend the support arm on the pole, assuming there is no interference of other infrastructure, telecommunication wires, etc. So BC Hydro, we're asking them to change it out. Also want to make sure that they attend to some of the other issues and when they're at the light to do it right this time.
Thank you. Well, thank you for doing the homework. That's very good. Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, I would also suggest too that we're sort of rehashing the earlier debate to some extent here. And so if citizens want to get more of the hard facts, the illumination engineer report, we probably spent 5 digits to order that. That's available publicly. If you want to get some of the questions that have been raised are answered in that report. So if you want to read that, read that. The only thing through staff is, as much as I know we want to have this whole issue in our rearview mirror, one of the issues that I see that I wish BC Hydro would do, I understand that shielding is off the table, but there's 2 different types of luminaires, and if they had a different type of distribution, that would help a lot of people in town. I know it's not something they're offering right now, but if that becomes something they offer in the future, that might be an interesting conversation. But at the same time, this is a BC Hydro decision. It's not really our decision, what products they actually offer us. So it's unfortunate, but it's where we are.
Thank you. On the issue that Councillor Skipsey raised regarding looking at spillage and what other communities have done, that's not really a motion, although you can make it a motion that we would look at that in the fall under the 2024 strategic plan.
Sure, I would make a motion to refer that matter.
To the strategic plan in
Yep.
2024.
Thank you.
Okay. And Councillor Vander second that. Councillor Young.
Just one point though, in our motion to change out the lights, let's just ask BC Hydro to have more attention to details on the positioning if we're not able to get the shields. Just like we just need it to be really specific, and so that it's just done right this time and we don't have more comments.
Yes, Ms. Rell, I think we've given that direction before in similar wording.
Yes, we've had robust discussions with BC Hydro.
Okay, so I'll call the question on that, on your deferral, and any further discussion on that. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Delegations. Pleased to welcome Cheryl Dill. Come on up, Cheryl. You have up to 5 minutes.
No, there we go. Okay, thank you very much. I would like to initially make a request, if I may, to extend our presentation by about 7 minutes. Thank you very much. So, Your Worship and Council, thank you very much for having us here today representing the Career Centre. My name is Cheryl Dill. I'm the Executive Director for the Career Centre. We're located in Parksville, and I'm here with a colleague of mine, and that's Lori Mole, and she is the Employment Services Coordinator. And we're happy today to tell you about how we serve this region. What many people don't realize is that the Career Centre is actually a not-for-profit society. And we are called the Central Vancouver Island Job Opportunities Building Society. We've actually been serving this region since 1976. And because it's a lot easier to say the Career Centre, that's our doing business as a Career Centre title, or as a Career Centre instead of CVI Jobs. Our mission in serving this region, which is typically Parksville, Qualicum Beach, and surrounding area from Nanoose to Bowser and into Arrington and Coombs, is that we deliver employment-related services to benefit job seekers and employers alike. And we are very proud to contribute to the social and economic development of the region we serve. How we do that is that we operate an employment services center for job seekers to come on in or work with us virtually to get assistance in finding employment. And then we also work really diligently to build relationships with our employers in the region and our community partners in the region. We spend a lot of time on research and gathering local labor market information and compiling that and sharing it as appropriate. And through that research, we identify gaps that exist within our region, and then we work hard to fill those gaps, either on our own or in partnership with other organizations. Now, what you may not realize is that our main service is that we operate a Work BC Employment Services Center. And we do that because we operate a contract with the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction. That's a provincial ministry in British Columbia. And so we have this main contract as a prime contractor for our region, which began in 2019. And this is one of several contracts that we've held provincially since 1976. Now, our contract currently ends March 31st, 2027. So the Work BC Employment Services Center, we're actually one of 42 prime contractors across the province and one of 8 on Vancouver Island. The region that we actually serve through this contract is all the way to the West Coast, so to Tofino and Ucluelet. But we work really closely with Island Work Transitions to deliver those services in Port Alberni, Tofino, and Ucluelet, and cover all of those regions with Indigenous communities throughout. But today, I want to focus on this region, which is the Parksville, Qualicum, Nanoose, Bowser, Arrington, and Lasqueti Island area that we serve. So who do we serve? Well, we serve anyone who needs support to understand our labor market. Where are the jobs and what kind of jobs are available? It may be people who just moved to our area and say, where are the employment opportunities here? Or people that wish to return to work for whatever reason they've had a break from employment, or perhaps they want to start their first job and need some assistance. Maybe they want to obtain some training and have a change in their employment and go back to school. We support that. We're going to tell you how we do that. And then we also help people who have just obtained a job get to work more easily without a lot of financial outlay, because we can provide job starts such as equipment or clothing that they may need, transportation. We also help people become their own employer. So the type of services that we provide is that we title that as job readiness preparation, which can include a variety of things. We also have staff who are well trained to provide employment counseling and help people create employment plans. How do I get back to work? Or how do I become a nurse? Or how do I get involved in this manufacturing industry that I'm interested in? We cover the cost of tuition up to $7,500. We provide reimbursements for books. We provide childcare, and we provide childcare expenses, that is, and we provide transportation expenses. If it's self-employment, we support business plan, training, and startup support. And something that we've been very, very busy on, especially since the pandemic, is we've provided wage subsidy support to employers, so employers can hire and get a portion of those training expenses, on average 50% of their wages, back for up to 6 months. We'll talk a little bit more about what those actual numbers look like. I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Lori Mull.
Switch. Great. Thanks. So in terms of supporting employers, we have a free job board. This is something that any employer can post their job on. It's free, and they can edit it on the fly and put that information out to the community. About 1,200 people a day view our website and job board. That's people who are looking for work. They may be already employed, they may be unemployed, they may be underemployed. They may be looking at moving here from Moose Jaw. We have an annual hiring fair. We had it in March this year. We had over 50 employers in the room and over 475 job seekers that attended. It was held at BYLAWS and was really exciting to see a grade 10 student engaging with the 911 dispatcher to find out how that might be their job in the future. We hold educational workshops during Small Business Week. We do this with both chambers of commerce. Topics we have covered off are employment standards, mental health in the workplace, how to be a more inclusive employer. We provide employment-related advice. This is probably something that takes up most of my day for individuals who are looking at starting a business and they don't know where to go. Where do I go? Where do I get started? Where do I register? What do you mean I payroll deductions? We have a newsletter that goes out to the employers, letting them know about services, activities, minimum wages going up on June 1st. And we have started doing what's called a pulse check, sending out a question to employers to get local information back quickly so we can disperse that back to job seekers and to the employers. The last one we did was on cover letters. Right now, you can get your cover letter done very quickly with artificial intelligence. So how important is it? It is important. Employers are wanting cover letters, so we were glad to ask that question and get that information. And then the wage subsidy program. This program provides reimbursement back to employers for between 30 and 50% of a wage that they're paying to an employee they're training. They put a training plan together. They submit in very easily a copy of the pay stub, time card, and what they've trained the person on, and we're able to give them back a subsidy. So this has really helped jumpstart a lot of businesses who were in that shutdown and adjusting phase from the pandemic. We have 2 time frames up on this slide. You'll notice one time frame is actually twice as long as the other one. So the second time frame going from 2019 to 22 is half the amount of time, double the volume of the actual wage subsidies we have put out into the community, doubling the amount of dollars put out into the community. I know this is a mind-boggling slide. I'm sure you'll get this in your package. When we talk about labor market information, from a job seeker's perspective, what they want to know is what's the forecast? Where are the jobs? What does it pay? What skills do I need? From an employer's perspective, they want to know how many available people are there, what skills do they have, and what compensation do I need to offer to attract them. This is the census data. I want to focus on our region because it's not just Qualicum Beach, it is all of the residents that are in our community. Majority of residents of Qualicum Beach actually work outside of Qualicum Beach, so it's important that we look at that whole section. The one item I'll draw your attention to, you're probably very familiar with it, is our low participation rate. So that is the percentage of the population who are in the labor force, age 15 and older, who are employed or unemployed. And Qualicum Beach is 35%. The province, and most areas in the province, is 63%. So that data was from census. Looking at information most recent for March, the unemployment rate for British Columbia is 4.5%. For Vancouver Island, 3.6. So in the census, it was about 8%. So when we say it's a tight labor market, and we see so many help wanted signs, that is what this picture is. We have very few people unemployed seeking work. And that makes it very competitive for our employers, so that the wage subsidy and other services we provide are there to assist and be a tool. So where are the jobs? Again, a lot of numbers, sorry about that. I'll focus down on line 7. So this is trades. So the first column is the percentage of jobs in that category. So it's about 20%. The job postings that we receive to our job board also are about 20% in this category. And our clients, we've asked them where we track where they get jobs. Again, about 20% achieve a job in this occupation. So there is some correlation. A lot of people think about careers center and jobs and the clients we have, and a lot of them think service and sales. So we do have about 10% of our individuals we serve end up working frontline prep, cook, chef, and 8% cashier and sales. But the other occupations that we help people find work with are listed, and it's broad. We have individuals that are now data analysis with BC Ferries, and every spectrum between educational assistants, healthcare aides, nurses, teachers, bookkeepers. The spectrum is quite wide. Where are the gaps? We've all heard about the shortage. We've all probably experienced it when we've tried to stand in line for any service. Healthcare definitely is on everyone's mind. And early education assistants and ECE, we definitely have a shortage of those. Community support workers, bookkeepers, and anyone doing personal assistance.
As I mentioned earlier, we do track and a lot of data related to the labor market and research. You'll see in this slide here, from the previous contract we implemented for employment services, we noted a downward trend. That's the blue bars in job seekers coming in to seek services for employment. Well, at the same time, jobs were on the increase. Today, we see that jobs are still on the increase, the orange bars, and look at the difference between the available jobs and the number of job seekers. So it's quite interesting to note that today, in 2022, the number of jobs available equal the number of jobs seekers that were available in 2013. So a real mismatch that we have happening. Just to give you an idea, the type of supports that we provide specifically from a monetary point of view, in the past 4 years, as of this is data up till March 31st of this year, our center has facilitated $2.5 million going directly into this local economy, just this region. The majority of which, in the light color orange, is wage subsidy. So $1.25 million just back into employers' pockets for wage subsidy. And we don't see that trend declining in the next few years. The government still is encouraging employers to take advantage of this amazing program. The other large portion of funding we distribute goes directly to job seekers who are investing in training in their own education. So those dollars go directly to our post-secondary, private and public post-secondary organizations, into their pockets for tuition and books, and then the remainder is childcare, transportation. So we facilitate a lot of funding exchange from the government into employers and job seekers' pockets. So we're proud of supporting that, which again contributes to social and economic development. One other thing that we really enjoy spending time with is putting employers and organizations together with helping to fill the gaps. So things that we have supported is job seekers getting into programs such as these that are developed by post-secondary educational organizations as well as employers who have jobs. So those are called community employer partnerships, and a lot of funding goes to pay for people so they don't have to spend $1 in training. Other types of programs that we deliver, Blade Runners program, you've probably heard of that. That's helping youth at risk get into work for their first jobs. And so we've been delivering the Blade Runners programs in Parksville-Qualicum region since 2015. We also are just about to launch the Pathway to Trades program, also geared to youth, in working with Vancouver Island University. So we're really pleased to be having a carpentry and electrician trades focus in the Parksville-Qualicum region this summer. One of the other programs that we acquired funding to do is a program called From Retired to Hired, and we had a lot of success in putting those who are 55 plus back to work in our local economy. We also have a tutoring program that we're very proud of, and we match tutors who we train to volunteer their time to teach people who need literacy improvement. And we have the majority of our learners right now do not speak English as a first language, and we've seen a lot of Ukrainians come to our organization to get paired up with people to help them settle in our region as well. Here's our team. We've got about 20 people. This is a portion of them. We were having fun that day, and I can't say enough about the expertise that we have at the Career Center. Thank you very much for your time, and I'd love to answer some questions if you have those.
Anyone have a question? Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, thanks, and I really appreciate the work you do. Also, I just want to highlight too, one program you guys did a couple years ago, which I really loved, was the Handmade for Hope with Orca Place.
Right.
So, you know, hat tip. That was a really wonderful thing. Because I know one thing that's really difficult for people who've sort of become stable again after struggling for a while, getting that first job interview is really tough, because what have you done? What's your connection with employment? And they say, oh, well, I am a recovering addict. Oh, great. Thank you. Next. So that was really great to see. One thing, too, is that you're talking about the number of job seekers relative to the number of jobs. One thing in the last census that was a new trend in our area, because I compile census data because I'm super fun, we had the fastest rate of decline of 20-year-olds that our region's ever seen. So the idea is that people move out in their 20s, come back later on. You also saw an influx of young families into Parksville and Qualicum Beach, which has never really happened before. Mm-hmm. So maybe this is just the remote work pandemic experiment, and then we'll go back to normal trends. But that decline in 20-year-olds is really felt in a lot of the service-related jobs. Mm-hmm. And also, too, for citizens who are interested, if you go to our census page and you word search commute, the things you're talking about people commuting, you can actually see breakdown by different profession type, 2 different systems, and where people commute. And yeah, the majority of people who live here commute to the RDN to work. So yeah, you guys are doing a great work, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Young.
It's not a question, it's a comment, well, maybe a question. Is it possible for you to lobby the federal government that there isn't the big clawback on seniors looking to subsidize their limited income with the rising cost of living right now? They have the experience, they're willing to work, but I've been told by my accountant that every dollar they earn gets clawed back. So we do have a lot of jobs, especially in Qualicum Beach, that are seeking getting filled, and we do have people that were willing to work, but they're not joining our workforce. Is there anything that you can do about that?
Through the mayor to Councillor Young, thank you for the question. We do belong to a provincial organization called ASPECTS, with the Association of Service Providers for Employment Training and Service Delivery. So that is a good organization that has the ear of the federal government from its associations with other organizations on a national level. So that would probably be a good route for us to advocate for that point. I'd like to be able to follow up to get some details from you as to the concern. But what I can say in working with, for the last 4 deliveries on the older worker program, is that, you know, what we do is we work with clients to identify what is sustainable employment, what's actually the math to achieve what you're talking about, you know, going back to work. What do I need for my household and to my lifestyle for creating a comfortable, sustainable employment situation? So that's one of the things we do, Councillor Young, is work with individuals of all ages to identify what that looks like and how to achieve it.
One more thing, and about housing, I hear that we also don't get a lot of employees because there's just not sufficient housing that they can afford. Mm-hmm. Is there something that the Career Center can do about that?
We have been, through the mayor to Councillor Young, thank you for the question. That is definitely a concern that we hear from job seekers. You know, the average rental rates that we hear for some of the new developments between, you know, $1,800 a month for a single apartment as rent to $2,400 is not affordable for job seekers coming to this area. So it is a significant concern. And you know, what we find is when we're talking with or individuals who are in the employment field of real estate, is the definition of affordable housing is clearly not understood. You know, to be able to afford your housing at leaving that at 30% or lower of your income is what's considered affordable, and those rates currently are not for this region. So it is a crisis. It's, it's great to see the development in this area, but we need more affordable housing, and that's not market rates currently.
Then also, like the Parts to Qualicum Tourism Association collects a hotel motel tax to support their employees when it comes to subsidizing their rent. Is there something the Career Center can do for other employees working in other industries as far as supporting their need for rental funding?
Mm-hmm. And through the mayor to Councillor Young, we have certainly had some conversations with chambers of commerce. We did a labor market information review and raised this. And one of the things we realize is we can't advocate for that on our own. We need to partner with other organizations that can advocate for that. And so we're very keen to partner with others to work towards a solution in this region. But, for example, there are the resort industries who have been in conversation together about what can we do to identify workforce housing. And so far, there hasn't been very many solutions along the way. I do know that some resorts have actually had to invest in renting some of the apartments in order to house some of their employees, because otherwise they cannot find people to work, because there is no place to afford in the region. Yeah.
With those questions, Councillor Young. Thank you, Ms. Dill and Ms. Mole, for coming out today and helping us understand what's going on in the market. Thank you.
It's our pleasure, and we'll be happy to serve as a resource for all of you, should you have
It
questions.
sounds like you had a follow-up with Ms. Young, Councillor Young later. Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Then we have under correspondence the reducing the community cancer risk from Radon, and I asked Councillor Skipsey, who seems to have done some work on this, for a discussion on that.
Yeah, well, I did not receive a response back from them on whether we were in time to participate, so we can just carry on. Thank you.
Thank you. Bylaws, and the first one is the zoning amendment and development variance permits for 230 2nd Avenue West. Mr. Sales.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. This item is regarding a zoning amendment and development permit application for 230 2nd Avenue West. The proposal is to construct a mixed-use building with ground floor commercial, 2 short-term vacation rentals on the 2nd floor, and 1 dwelling unit on the top floor. 3 of the 4 short-term vacation rental units on the 2nd floor have lock-off suites as well. So this property is located near the end of 2nd Avenue West. It's hard to see on the screen here, but it would be next to the bike shop and also next to the Villa Rose development. Next slide. This is a series of renderings showing the proposed building. The proposed commercial use on the ground floor, they're thinking that the design is well suited to a cafe or a bistro, tapas bar, something to that effect. The building is actually smaller on the ground floor than it is on the upper floors, which provides a covered parking area, which you can slightly see in the lower slides there. So the upper floors essentially hang over the lower floors. Next slide. This is a side elevation showing once again that the difference in size between the lower floor with the covered parking and the upper floor, which hangs over the top. Next slide. This is a landscape plan which you would see in your package. It's of course impossible to see on the screen up ahead, but it is in your package for your review. Next slide. This proposal has been before Council, and it's also been reviewed by the Advisory Planning Commission and was the subject of a public information meeting with a number of residents. That public information meeting was hosted by the developer, and notifications were sent out to the surrounding property owners. The recommendation from staff today is that the bylaw be read a second time and that a public hearing be scheduled for the upcoming council meeting, which would be on May 24th. And for that council meeting, notification would once again be sent to property owners within the 50-meter notification area. Thank you.
Thank you. We can have first reading on our second reading on the first item. We'll do them separately, and then we can still have discussion. Councillor Harrison, seconded.
Moving the staff recommendation.
Move second reading and seconded by Councillor Young. Discussion. Councillor
Oh,
Harrison.
just briefly, I just point out that I know sometimes people have been raising the issue of the idea of short-term rental on the property, but this is in a commercial section of our community, not a residential section. And if you actually read the OCP, short-term rentals are exclusively forbidden in residential areas. It doesn't mention anything about commercial in our OCP. So there's nothing in our OCP that's contrary to this proposed development.
Councillor Skipsey.
Okay, I have a number of questions and then a couple of comments. Well, one is a concern about there not being enough parking. If we have 4 short-term rental units plus 3 lock-offs, so that could be 7 parking spots that would be used of the 9, and then we haven't talked about the owner or any kind of commercial. So that is a concern for me. I note that it's step code 3, and I love the idea of a green roof. But we recently received some correspondence which suggested that step code 3 is now the minimum required as of May 1st, and I'm not sure if that's the case or not. I'd just like to confirm that with staff.
Mr. Sales.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. I would have to confirm that and bring back that information for the next council meeting. I know a new version of the building code was coming out, but I'm not totally confident on the implementation date, so if you'll leave that with me, I can report at the next meeting.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Also, I had a question about how many charging stations are required in order to receive the relaxation on the parking requirement, or maybe the question is how many would they be considering providing?
Thank you. Mr. Sales.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Skipsey. 1 parking stall has to be fully wired for the EV parking, and others can be roughed in. And the reduction, it would be 2 stalls. So that's, if you see in the staff report, it does show the proposed parking, and then when accounting for the reduction by way of the electric vehicle charging station, then the 2 match. So they do supply the required parking. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so then the next thing is the current price to buy a parking spot is, I understand, $11,000. And I believe that this price was adopted even before my time on council. So we're looking at almost 10 years, and we know what property values have done over that 10 years. So I think that before we sell any more parking, we need to revisit what that price for parking spot would be. And then I just say, to be consistent with my voting, I don't plan on voting in favor of this because we don't currently have a mechanism to manage short-term rentals. We don't have the framework. And things like fire inspections, are they required annually like they are in other tourist accommodations? I don't know. Also, maybe there could be a requirement for the owner to have to live in the same building, like we do with a bed and breakfast. If somebody wants to rent out in their home, then they currently need to reside, and then those are our current rules. So I just think we need to be consistent. Thank you.
Thank you. Regarding the need for fire inspections, can you respond to that?
Yes, thank you. That is something that the staff have been working through, because we do have properties in the town where short-term vacation rental is permitted. So within the commercial 2 zone, primarily on the waterfront, there are properties that are fully residential, an entire dwelling unit, but the zoning permits them to be rented full-time. So the procedure that staff follow is that it's basically treated just like a hotel. So that would require inspections to make sure that life safety issues are met, including access to fire extinguishers and all the requirements of the building code. So So that is the procedure that the town is following, and should council adopt this zoning bylaw, that would also be the case in this location.
As far as the cost of, or the price of a parking spot, I think we need to flag that for our strategic planning discussions for this fall. Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Oh, and just one thing I'd point out too is when we're discussing the step code, it's helpful to remember that there's 2 different numbering systems, which was really helpful from the province. One for single-family homes and townhouses, another for larger multifamily buildings. A building of this scale, I'm not sure which of the 2 it is, but one of them is 3 out of 5 is where we're at, and that's for the single-family townhouses. So that's the one that which the discussion was about, is should we consider step 4 instead? But the multifamily is only a 4-step step code. I'm not sure. I think we're only on step 2 of that 4-step step code for the multifamily. So when we get that clarification, it'd be good to make sure that we're looking at the right type of step code for the right type of building. And that was just the one thing I wanted to say really on that whole step code thing. And I do think it's important that we avoid the temptation to sort of do like spot regulation, like people are talking about spot zoning, but also doing spot regulation for a one-off. It's better to have a coherent policy, I think, for the whole community instead. And lastly, I just highlight that I think our community is a little bit too small to really go there, but if you're looking at progressive urban design, you're actually trying to move away from cars altogether, and you're trying to move away from focusing too much on parking and trying to encourage more cycling, pedestrian use in your downtown core. Granted, a community of our size, that's very difficult to do because you're going to need to drive to Nanaimo for a lot of stuff. Let's just be honest. But in terms of a long-term goal, it's a great debate to look at how much we want to encourage parking in the downtown core.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
I'll be voting in favor of this development. For years, the Chamber and the Parts of Qualicum Tourism Association has spoken about how in the downtown core it'd be nice to have a little boutique hotel feature. It will help with commerce. We've got the Civic Center right there, so visitors can stay close to the conference they're going to. They could be shopping the downtown, and they probably would not require a car or be coming in with a car. The other thing is there is the Civic Center with their huge parking lot adjacent, very close to this development, and that would be really helpful. And secondly, I have a business downtown, and by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there's lots of parking on 2nd Avenue and in the downtown core every day.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Vander.
Thank you. I have many similar questions and concerns to Councillor Skipsey. She's covered a lot of the questions that I had. I do think that we need to clarify about residential versus commercial, and I'm not against necessarily a boutique hotel in the downtown. But this doesn't really qualify as a hotel because it's short-term rentals in a different form. So I agree that we need some kind of structure that will clarify that. And in the notes you have told us, Mr. Sales, that the province is currently exploring options to expand split classifications of properties so that commercial use of property for short-term rental accommodation is reflected in property tax assessments. Do you have any sense of where the provincial government is with that? Because you also say that short-term rental units in this particular project on the 2nd floor would be considered residential. And as Councillor Harrison pointed out, this is in a commercial area. So there definitely seems to be a conflict here. And if you could just clarify that for me, that would be great.
Thank you, Councillor Vander. Mr. Sales.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Vander. The discussion around the province's pending legislation came up in the recent housing symposium in Vancouver, and there was a session on short-term vacation rentals. Lots of these same issues came up. There was someone there from the province that very clearly forecasted that they're working on legislation, and the intent is to give local governments the tools to regulate. So those tools are coming. Any legislation like that, I wouldn't bet on the landing time. I don't know when it'll actually happen, but it's something that is very clearly underway. So the comment in the staff report that the second floor units, which are short-term vacation rental, would be considered residential, that's recognizing the fact that BC Assessment classifies properties right now according to their use and considers those types of short-term vacation rentals to be residential in nature. So that's reflecting the current status, but as the staff report also notes, is that this does create an inequity, and municipalities all over BC are alive to that issue, where a property is being used commercially, taxed residentially, and there's a big discrepancy in the tax revenue. So regardless of the town's decision on this particular property, that legislation is moving forward. The one thing I would note is that if the town does choose to advance with this property, that doesn't mean that the town would miss any of those opportunities to make sure that this property is properly accounted for in taxation in the future. So in other words, it's not the case that the town would have to wait for that legislation before making a decision on this property.
Thank you. And I have some other questions. I would also, as Councillor Skipsey pointed out, I would like to find out about the current situation with the step codes. And also, if you could get us some information about the BC Zero Carbon Step Code, that would be appreciated when you're looking at the step code 3 versus 4. Also, I have a question. I am the liaison for the Tourism Association, and they are very concerned about short-term rentals, and in particular, they are concerned about more the VRBO as opposed to the Airbnb. Airbnb, the owner resides on the site. VRBO and similar platforms to the resident, or the owner does not have to reside on the site. So I wonder if there's any way, if this current owner is living on the site, because the whole third floor is going to be their suite, and if they were to sell, is there any way that we can make sure that the new owner would also live on the site so that it's not a different platform?
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. I was just making a note of that because there are legal ways to do that, but we would have to have some discussions with the owner to see whether they would be amenable to those types of restrictions. So
okay.
I'm just making a note, and maybe we can have clarity at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. And then I did have a question about the height. You're looking for a height, increased height from 10 meters to 11.5 meters. And you have in the notes that that's to accommodate the housing for the elevator. But is it not created by having higher floors in between? So I just wanted to know the necessity of having that increased height.
Through the chair to Councillor Vander. There are a variety of reasons. One is that people are expecting the higher ceilings, so that is undoubtedly a factor in that need for the additional height. An elevator does always protrude above the roof, and if you look carefully at the design drawings, hopefully it's visible on the scale of your package, but it does show the exact difference between the parapet height and the elevator overrun, which is required for the mechanical equipment. But I do want to highlight another point that was made in the staff report, and that is that the zoning, which was specifically written for this property to accommodate short-term vacation rental, does include that increased height rather than relying on a variance. And at the staff level, we have recognized the fact that given that every development in the downtown, uptown area is requiring that increased height, it's likely time to revisit that height in the first place. So that's just a footnote that we will be coming back to discuss that perhaps in an upcoming housing amendment or housekeeping zoning amendment, because when every applicant is requesting that because of higher ceilings, I think we have something to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments, Ms. Van der Velde?
I do. I thought I did. Oh, in the floor plans, on page, in the floor plans, there are a couple of bedrooms that seem to me, my understanding is that a bedroom has to have an opening window and a closet. And some of these rooms don't seem to have that. Can you just clarify that for me? I'm looking at specifically on this page 32. So specifically on the bedrooms that are at the back of the second floor, they're pretty minimal size. I don't see any, there is a window on each of them. I'm assuming that they would be operable, but no closet space. So I'm just wondering about that.
Thank you. To the chair. I think probably the best way to respond to that is to clarify the difference between development permit drawings and the actual building code submissions. It's very common for minor changes, like slight changes to window size, going from unopening to opening, incorporating closets. Those types of refinements are very often made after the development permit drawings go into the building code. So at the time that this is, the architect puts together a complete set of drawings for the building inspector, all of those types of code issues would be incorporated into the submission. So it could be that there's a discrepancy on these plans, but these, no one should assume that this is exactly the floor plan that would be constructed. There would likely be some minor refinements. Thank you.
I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Van der Velde. Councillor Harrison.
And just to point out too, because both Mr. Sales and I were in the room for that discussion on short-term rentals, the lead sort of presentation was by the City of Vancouver, and they have a very robust system, but I also caution they have proprietary software that they developed to enforce it and 3 full-time staff people to manage that. Now, obviously, we're a much smaller community, so we wouldn't necessarily have the same outlay in terms of full-time employment, but where the province seemed to be going is more ensuring that we would have access to the data to enforce, rather than they would set up the service and we could just give a nominal fee and they'd do all the work for us. That was my impression. Now, who knows what the province will do. But I'd highlight that if we wanted to go down a more robust enforcement option, it would likely include having to look at a staffing component to operate that, because there's just a lot of time spent physically going online looking at things. I do think too the helpful differentiation between VRBO and Airbnb is actually, it's a good point, something that doesn't come up enough, but actually is an important point, because VRBO is specifically designed for you rent out the house. And this is your house. That's their advertising now, is you get the house. So I think that actually is when we start having those conversations next year, according to our financial plan, and should be happening next year. Those are some good conversations to bear in mind. But I'd hesitate against putting a covenant on one property when we're about to do the regulation next year anyways, because that property will be included in the regulation no matter what. So it would seem unfair to put in a covenant, do the regulation, then probably have to release the covenant because it's duplicating the regulation. It just seems like an extra step. I think we're better served just advancing this and then addressing whatever council wants to do in terms of having to live on the property through the regulation for short-term rentals that will develop next year.
Okay, we better call the question before you talk me out of voting for it. Are you ready for the question? Councillor Young.
Sorry. As a recent past director of Chamber of Commerce and past director of Parts of Qualicum Tourism Association. I'm a past director because I ran for office. And during our committee meetings, it was a concern about having Airbnbs in residential areas because that's taken away from people wanting to rent. And the conversation also, possible solution was to have the Airbnbs in the commercial areas. And so for this development to offer Airbnb, boutique hotel, that kind of thing in a commercial zone, again, I'm very in favor of that.
Thank you. Are you ready for the question? All in favor? Councillor Harrison, Councillor Young, Mayor Westbroek. Opposed? Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Vander. Thank you. Motion carries. And then for holding a public hearing on May 24th. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Harrison. Councillor Young. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Okay. Opposed, Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Vander. Motion carries. Thank you. Alternative municipal tax collections. I guess, Ms. Hare, I'll pass that on to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this bylaw is to take the penalty dates back to pre-pandemic levels. I believe we need an alternative tax scheme bylaw to do that. So it's proposing that the penalties be returned to 5% for outstanding property taxes on July 4th, and then 5% on, I believe it's the end of September.
Thank you. We've passed first reading. Can I have a motion for second reading? Councillor Harrison, Councillor Skipsey.
I'd move 1 and 2 together.
No, do one at a time.
Okay.
Yeah. So for second reading, moved and seconded. All discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried unanimously. And for third reading, Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Harrison, discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Town of Qualicum Beach 5-year financial plan. Ms. Hare. Mr. Hare.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Council. So again, this report is a repeat of the report that you're provided for first reading. We're at second and third reading of the financial plan bylaw. There were a couple of minor amendments requested to the budget book to provide clarification on basically with respect to workforce planning and one other area in the book, and those changes have been made.
Thank you. For second reading of our financial plan, Councillor Vander, Councillor Harrison. Discussion. Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, so my apologies if I'm out of the loop. We got an email from staff about funding for the Oceanside Community Track, and I was just wondering where that was in relation to the budget, just through the chair to staff. Thank you.
Mr. Hare.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Harrison, I believe there is a memo being considered at the next council meeting. So in relation to the financial plan, any events that take place once a financial plan has been considered can be will be compiled by staff and included in a financial plan amendment. So if your concern was with respect to it being included in the financial plan, we would pick up whatever decision council makes in a subsequent financial plan amendment that would be done in the fall.
Okay, Councillor Harrison.
Just because the reason being that I know what the city of Parksville did is essentially the school district and everyone who's with all the different liaisons for the community track, sorry, pen went flying, they were given a presentation where the all-in figure this year is $712,000. At a recent City of Parksville meeting, they penciled in the whole entirety of that amount in their budget as a placeholder figure. And they made it clear that ideally they'd be spending $500,000 in the RDN, and the town of Qualicum would cover the $212 between them in whatever fashion we saw fit. Now that's what Parksville wanted, and I'm not saying that's what council is going to do, but just if we were to do something where it's $106,000, that's a pretty hefty chunk of funds. It's basically a 1% tax increase. So I just want to make sure that we're not in a position where we've essentially passed the budget, and then it's an amount where it creates complications later on. The other thing for me would be the timeliness factor. They were hoping to get the work done over the summer to be minimally impactful for students in the next year because it's happening right next door to a secondary school. And it's a very tight timeline this year if you're going to get the work done this year. There were some discussions with local contractors to make sure they were available. I'm not sure they had every single contract lined up, but some of them, for about at least 2/3 of the work, they already had people lined up if informally, you know, they still need to go through a process. It's because of the RDN, essentially. But I just wanted to make sure we don't put ourselves in a position where the money comes too late or we're not in a position to be able to support that initiative, because I do think it's something where we want to make sure as a region that it's fully funded this year and it's done in terms of the financial component.
Yeah, if we wanted to do it, it would come out of reserve, so it doesn't change the financial plan. Any further discussion on second reading for the 5-year financial plan? Councillor Harrison.
There's just one thing I wanted to point out too. So it was in last meeting's documents, but there was a section on building services, which I found very interesting. And it goes over the last 4 years worth of construction figures. And the one thing I found very interesting about this year, so 2020 actual, is the multi-residential unit construction. And so yes, we're seeing a high number relative to most other years for multi-family residential, but it's all the affordable housing at Railway. It's the 56 units, that's just Railway. All other multi-family construction in 2022 is 0 units. So I just wanted to flag that as something that leapt out at me as something I'm a little bit concerned about, because as we just heard about the lack of people in the workforce in our area, younger people are going to have a really hard time affording a single-family home in this area, no matter where it's built. So you do want to look at how are we making sure that some multifamily actually gets built in Qualicum Beach. Otherwise, we're not going to have workers moving forward. Now, this is something which there's a few things in the budget which relate to this directly. You know, there's 2 different allotments, I think, in the budget for that. But I also sort of highlighted, I'm not chastising anyone in particular here, that the total capital outlay in our 5-year financial plan is about $160 million. And the total funding for housing is 0.044% of the budget. So I just want to highlight that we have a real problem on this issue, and it remains to be seen. Like, I'm not sure I'm going to propose an amendment or anything to the financial plan, but I just want to flag that this is something that's a very thorny issue, and we're probably going to be looking at things in the next year or two that might be additional to this.
All right, any further comments for second reading of a 5-year plan? Councillor Skipsey.
Well, just one comment in response to Councillor Harrison's last comment. Oftentimes, the investment the town makes is the land, and so you wouldn't necessarily have that reflected as a monetary line item in the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. And for third reading? Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Vander, discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried for third reading. And then the tax rates bylaw, which are just flow out from once you set your budget, the tax rates are an automatic conclusion. So could I have those for the first one for second reading? Councillor Harrison, Councillor Vander, all in discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. And for third reading? Councillor Young, Councillor Vander, discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And then we have the committee in liaison reports. I got a message that often we do the red dress honoring women that were murdered or missing, particularly the Indigenous women here in our lobby, but this year it's different. And I'm going to ask Ms. Swenson if you can identify perhaps what the difference and what we're doing about with that.
Thank you. So normally the University Women's Club historically has done it with council, a ceremony in the foyer hanging the red dresses in November, and they're going to stay with that process. So we want to recognize that May 5th is the official red dress day, which is coming up. And so just wanted to publicly recognize that. We will be posting some information on our website and on our social media to recognize that day, but we will also partner with the University Women's Club in November as we have done in the past.
Thank you. That's just for information. Then, as I mentioned earlier, we're going on Saturday, we're going to witness the coronation of our new king. We also attended the AVICC, and the motion or the resolution that came from Qualicum Beach regarding broom busting was passed unanimously. So you probably heard a lot about the pool function, and there will be a new select committee. I will be representing Qualicum Beach on that select committee. It will be chaired by the board chair, so all of us can participate fully. And the point that I've been trying to make is that when it says in the headline, you know, the mayor wants, Qualicum Beach wants Nanoose to pay for a pool, that was a little bit stretching of what is really going on. And fortunately, most people read the whole story, and I'm talking about usage, which is 3 to 5%. And I've had good discussions with the electoral area director, Mr. Rogers, and I said, what we're saying is usage, 3 to 5%, pay something. And well, I don't know if anybody's using the pool. I said, we know. As a matter of fact, Councillor Young, when she lived in Nanoose, they brought the children for swimming lessons to our pool. There are certain events that take place that use the pool. So, you know, be a partner in this. And I mentioned the fact that Qualicum Beach invested over $1 million, I think $1.3 million in our Aerosmith water dam. We don't use that water, so it's available for Nanoose. That should be worth something. You know, we're partners. I mean, I support the continuation of the support of the Aerosmith water dam because it also provides water for fish in the Englishman River when the water is dry and they need to have that water, but also for their own consumption. We raised our parcel tax for regional parks up to, at that time, $14 to help pay for Moorcroft Camp, which is the same distance for us to go there as they are to us for the pool. So I think we need to put on a bigger, more regional hat. And this group will also look at potential of a pool in Parksville, because if that happens, that changes everything. So we'll be discussing having another pool in Parksville and what kind of function that would look like. So those are the main items that I thought I'd report on today. Then there's a notice of motion regarding food security. We had a presentation by Mr. Ritchie's, and basically the motion is directly from his presentation. So I make that as a motion. If I could have a seconder. Councillor Vander, discussion. Well, I thought this was a good idea, and it's also about to advise council on short and long-term needs and actions to promote and safeguard food security in the region. But the other point is, rather than having a special committee, if it could be part of the Sustainability, Environment Sustainability Committee. So I will bring this up, and I'll move that we defer this motion to the May 24th meeting. So I make a motion to defer. If I can have a motion to defer, I move the deferral, and Councillor Skipsey seconded. Discussion on deferment. It's just for the defer, so only on the defer.
I'm just curious as to why we defer it, because I don't think there's a lot of meat to the debate.
The reason why I want to defer is because I want to have a chance for the committee to look at how they could include that in their mandate, in their parameters for their committee structure. I don't want to push it on them. I want to ask, are you okay? Can you do that? Can you work with that? So I wanted some time out of respect to see how they feel about getting an extra charge. So with that, on the deferral, all in favor? Opposed, if any, carried. Thank you. Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Harrison.
All righty. So there's a few different things that I wanted to draw attention to. Firstly is a notice of motion, and we heard earlier about the difficulty of finding accommodation. This, the rent bank basically serves two functions. What the rent bank does is it gives short-term loans to people who are facing difficulty making their rent. Now, why this is really important in our community is that over 80% of our rental market is the secondary market, where it's a suite in someone's house or it's part of someone's building. We have a very small percentage of our market, which is the primary market, where it's an actual building for rental accommodation. And if you're someone who's been living in a garden suite for 5 or 10 years and able to get by just barely, and then something happens and you can't make a few rent payments and you get thrown out, that then allows the unit to be brought up to market levels, which is about $1,500 for a 1-bedroom. So when the people from the Career Center were saying it's $1,800 for the new developments for a 1-bedroom, it's $1,500 in the existing market for anything in Qualicum Beach right now for a 1-bedroom rental, which is prohibitive. And I also want to point out too, it's mentioned the whereases, but we are literally the 3rd worst community, according to the BC Nonprofit Housing Association for the renter affordability metric. The worst is Crescent, 2nd worst is West Van, 3rd worst is Qualicum Beach. So I'm just moving the notice of motion there for the $10,000 amount because we are really struggling when it comes to renter affordability. We are probably one of the worst communities in Canada, not just British Columbia, for this metric. And I think this is something where it'll actually prevent, people from becoming homeless in the first place. What we're seeing right now, and I'll get into this too when I talk about an event I attended about worker mortality, what we're seeing is a lot more seniors starting to become displaced. So you're starting to see a lot more people in their 60s and 70s starting to be displaced. This ties into that. Single seniors who've been renting for a while, then life happens and suddenly they can't make their rent. They're displaced and now there's nowhere they can afford. And on top of that too, we're seeing a huge spike in the number of 60-year-olds who are dying from fentanyl too recently, which for me, there's a bit of an overlap here where more 60-year-olds and seniors are being displaced, and then you're struggling, you're living out on your own. And so you start making some choices that are bad for your health. Anyways, if there's a seconder for that. The reason I'm not sure
Perhaps
actually.
you could have your motion and have a seconder and then we can debate it. Councillor Skipsey, carry on.
And so the reason why I'm saying we should do this too, they did come to council in, I think, the 2nd meeting of our term, looking for funds. But this is something where the amount of money that's being provided, the more money they have, the more good they can actually do. This is something where if we do it once, it gives them the ability to actually respond to more people over the next several years. I don't think this should be an ongoing commitment from the town, to be fair. This is something which is more in the province's bailiwick. But I do think to get them on their feet and up and running, this is the exact same amount they asked for from the RDN. Honestly, it'd be great if the City of Parksville put in $10,000 too. But I do disagree with the staff recommendation because this is something where, as I highlighted briefly a moment ago when I was talking about the budget, I don't think we're doing enough as a local government on this file. For renter affordability, this gets the most bang for our buck, and it's the most attainable in terms of being a small local government.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Further discussion? Councillor Vander Valk.
Yeah, I just had a question. Does the money that, if we were to give the rent bank money, does it go towards local support? Only local support?
It's done for the region, so the rent bank responds to the whole region as a whole. But I do know that the last time we had a point-in-time count for homeless individuals, they asked asked what is your last place of residence. It was, I believe, the 2015 point-in-time count, and about 1/6 or so of people who were homeless in our area had last resided in Qualicum Beach. So the important thing would be to follow up and make sure that citizens in our community are aware that this exists and it's available to support them. I think if people aren't aware that it exists, that could be a problem. But this is something that does serve our community.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
I'm just wondering, is there a limit to the number of people that can access the Nanaimo Rent Bank? And the other question is it a limitless pot that you will have there? Or is it going to run out when all of a sudden a lot of people are applying? And also, if it does run out, then is it good for us to put in $10,000 to the Nanaimo Rent Bank that looks after so many other communities? Maybe we should develop our own rent bank.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Well, I would suggest that the cost to operate would significantly exceed $10,000 in terms of salary, because you're going to need to have people actually managing that. The other thing is that it's not money that disappears. These are loans. These aren't gifts or bursaries. So you give someone essentially 2 months' rent so they can catch up with their back rent and not be evicted. And then that tenant over time has to pay them back, is my understanding of how the program works. So it's not that the money disappears. And by having greater fiscal capacity, they can actually ensure they don't run into a valley where too many people have asked at the same time, and then they're waiting for that money to come back before they help anyone else.
Councillor Skipsey.
Yeah, would we have any idea how much the RDN contributes and what portion of that would be on behalf of Qualicum Beach?
I don't know that. Perhaps staff does? No? Can we check that out? Because I know they contribute something, but I forgot to ask how much they contribute. I should have asked that in light of this motion. So can we defer this and see how much we're already contributing through our taxes? Because 10,000, when you hear the cost of rent, is not going to go very far. But if we can do more by working together as a region, then I would support that. So I move that we defer until we get more details on the amount of money that's being spent based on from the taxpayers of Qualicum Beach. Councillor second for deferral. On the motion to defer, Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, I just think that the amount of money is so small, I don't see the reason to defer. You're looking at the population of Qualicum Beach is 9,303 people relative to over 100,000 for Nanaimo and about 155,000 for the regional district of Nanaimo. So you can do a rough estimate based on that. So it'd probably be under $1,000 would be the contribution.
This is about the deferral.
Yeah, this is about the deferral. So given that you have pretty clear math on what the likely contribution of the town would be, the amount of money we're going to spend in staff time to even come up with that report is probably equivalent to the total contribution.
A point of order. Deferral is if you're voting on the deferral.
Yes, and I'm saying this is why, because...
No, Councillor Harrison, there's no debate on deferral.
Yes, and I'm speaking to the deferral.
But there's no debate on deferral. We can vote on it.
You're able to debate the reason why you're deferring on a motion to defer.
We just all came from the AVICC where this came up, and they said when you call a motion
okay,
to
so can
defer,
we go to staff then? What does it say about what you're able to debate during a motion to defer?
You talk about whether you want to defer it or not.
Yes, you debate the motion to defer.
No, you vote on it. So I'm going to call
there
the
is
question.
only, sorry, no.
Councillor Harrison, if you want to challenge the chair, you can, but I'm ruling.
I'm just
that we're
asking
voting-
staff to...
No, please don't interrupt. On the motion to defer, you simply vote whether you defer it or not. That's the question. Are you in favor of deferral? All in favor of deferral?
Point of order, that's actually improper. That's not what's in Robert's Rules of Order. It's not what's in our handout. And I'd ask staff to clarify that point before we proceed any further. I'd rather we don't do an illegal motion to defer.
Well, if we could talk about deferral...
Can we recess for 5 minutes? Motion to recess, I believe, takes priority.
We can ask staff whether it is clear whether we can actually debate the motion to defer. Ms. Swenson.
I'd like to take a 5-minute recess. Yeah.
Take a 5-minute recess. Thank you. It may actually be quicker if you voted on it and you're done with it. All right, I'll call the meeting back to order. The motion to defer is debatable, but the debate has to be on the deferral. So I guess we both kind of sat there, and perhaps if we can make a decision on whether to defer it or not, that would be helpful for everybody, because it's going to come back. When it defers, it means it comes back and it'll be debated again. So perhaps if you allow me some flexibility and say, let's call the question on deferral and then debate it when it comes back. All right? On a motion to defer, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Then, you have more work? Yes,
yeah,
go
no,
ahead.
I did have more. So the mayor was unavailable last Friday, so I attended events there's a day of mourning for people who lost their lives in the workforce. It's great to see Gord Johns and Adam Walker at different times because they're scheduled. And also Amit Gar from the Parksville City Council. And the point I wanted to make when I went there is that perhaps you heard about the 181 people in BC who lost their job on the worksite last year. A lot of that would be in construction or in forestry, inherently dangerous jobs, some first responders as well. But the point I was trying to make is that there's also significant overlap with the opioid crisis. In BC, less than a third of people who die from an overdose die outside. That's about 1 in 6 actually die outside somewhere on the street or in the woods. And less than a third of people who overdose don't have any job at all. You have about 25% who are fully employed for 5 years, and then the majority are employed on and off over the last 5 years. And there's a real predilection, in particular for the construction sector, for people who are in the trades. There's a very high rate of hospitalization at the city of Nanaimo's hospital for overdoses for the construction trades. So one thing the provincial government did last year, which was really good, is called the Tailgate Toolkit. So if you know a lot of people in construction, it's a great resource designed essentially by the construction sector to help people in the construction sector. And the province gave $1 million for that. And I remember that conversation. I had a cousin who works in the trades in this area, and we were just talking about the issue overall, and just casually, says, yeah, some of the guys I work with are dead now. It's really common. And the other thing I wanted to highlight was a lot of the mental health and first responders who are trying to support people who are struggling. They don't have enough resources in our area. There's a lot of reasons for that, but right now we're a bit of a desert in terms of supports relative to Comox Valley, Nanaimo, and Port Alberni. And for a lot of people who are on the front lines, when you're overburdened and you have a lot of difficult things to deal with, that can cause you to burn out. And then there's less supports for people overall. And within the last 3 years, the Nanaimo Hospital, the rate of mortality for overdoses has tripled in terms of the number of people dying in 3 years. So it went from just over 20 per 100,000 to over 60. So this is something where when we talk about workers losing their lives on their jobs, absolutely talk about people who are losing limbs in factories or having a tree fall on them while they're felling a tree out in the woods. But also too, there's a lot of people who are doing physical repetitive labor. They start taking pain medication for their back, sore back or other repetitive injuries, and then over time that develops into an addiction. The gateway drug in America is pain medication. So I just want to highlight that we're talking about 181 as a start, but the real number is probably a lot higher for people who are essentially working themselves to a position where their body's starting to break down. They start taking medication to deal with that, becomes an addiction, and then they end up dead. There's also another thing that I'm watching, I'm not proposing any course of action, but there's a very lively debate about the decriminalization of drugs and whether you should have a public nuisance bylaw about parks and playgrounds in particular. I think the city of Campbell River went way too far by trying to do all town property, but parks is something where I think there's a conversation. So we try to follow up with Island Health. The federal government had particular requirements for the provincial decriminalization. For example, BC must continue to engage with municipalities. I'm just quoting from the letter that Health Canada sent to the provincial government. And I would love to see how much of the requirements set up by the federal government have actually been met in our area. Because if everything's met, then we probably don't need to do anything. But if there's huge gaps, then we might have to look at a balance between what the province wants to do and then what public safety requires. Because I understand why the province is doing what it's doing, but I also remember just before I got on council, there was a issue at the farmer's market where someone stepped on a dirty needle and that caused them a lot of discomfort and was kind of scary. So I'm not proposing any course of action just yet, but I just want to flag that this is something that a lot of local governments are going to be dealing with over the next several months. And it's something in terms of a public safety lens we should be talking about. Again, I'm not sure where to land on that because healthcare policy is a little bit outside of our lane. Beyond that, there's no notice of motions or anything. I just wanted to flag that decriminalization, and there's some good articles online where you can look at what other municipalities are doing. And with that, I think that's, also want to highlight too, I had like 5 relatives who used to work at Lefties historically, and Lefties is gone. Dee's is now closed. I had another cousin who worked at Dee's for ages as a server. I don't know if it's permanent or temporary, but we're starting to see the impacts of a lack of workers in a lot of our restaurants starting to have problems. The public notices that Dee's couldn't find enough cooks, so they had to close their doors temporarily. I don't know if it's going to be permanent or not. But I just want to flag that we should be talking about the interaction between the amenities we all enjoy and making sure there are enough people to actually staff them and keep them operational. Because if we don't, we will run into the problem, well, there'll be a few more empty storefronts, and that's not good for anyone. And that concludes that.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Skipsey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had a sleepless night last night with a sick puppy, so if I seem a little off, it's because I am. Anyways, here we go. So I have a notice of motion on wildfire risk reduction program, and I would like to move the recommendations as presented on the agenda. Thank you. I just, later on in the agenda, we will be considering a grant application to come up with a wildfire plan for the rest of the community park. So I think this is a good opportunity to learn and to ask questions and whatnot, so.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Harrison.
And there's something I mentioned at UBCM ages ago, but just to a point that, like, there was internal emails that Councillor Skipsey circulated before the budget where she talked about carbon dioxide emissions. The largest form of carbon dioxide emissions the last few years in BC were the 2 bad wildfire years. So wildfires are not just a health risk because of particulate matter, but also in terms of environmental damage, they're the worst thing that could happen in our area.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Please,
Thank you.
Patrice.
And then I have a second notice of motion, and that's about evening committee of the whole meetings. And so that is that a number of upcoming committee of the whole meetings of significant interest to the community, including the review of the age-friendly transportation plan, be scheduled in the evening to provide enhanced opportunity for community engagement.
And I'll second that. The reason why I think it's good to have the committee of the whole meetings in the evening, because people can actually participate. And as we often heard, people can't come because they work or they go to school and they can't attend the daytime meetings. Well, the council meetings, as you've noticed, there's not much interaction. People can watch at any time at their own convenience in a comfortable chair whenever they're ready for it. But the committee of the whole are different. We allow for interaction, and that's why I thought it'd be a good idea to have committee of the whole meetings as they come up. Probably one will be on the tree protection bylaw, another one on the age-friendly transportation study that people can provide input on. Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
The only other thing I'd add is, should we maybe consider also some public hearings? Because there's some projects which are designed to meet the needs of younger families. We might also want to consider evening public hearings for that as well. But I do strongly support this. I think Councillor Skipsey's, it's great of her to bring this forward.
Thank you. And if there is, we just passed one for the 24th, but if future one, if council wants to see it in the evening, we can make that as a change. Further discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you.
Oh, so I have some more.
Yeah, go
things
ahead.
to go through. Okay, on April 13th, I attended the Youth Climate Action Symposium that was hosted by our Member of Parliament, Gord Johns, and I thought that was excellent, and there was a good turnout. As you mentioned, Mayor Westbrook, at AVICC, I wanted to thank you for doing such a great job of introducing the town's motion on control of Scotch broom. Apparently it was passed unanimously, which is rather rare at those forums, and now it'll go on to be considered at UBCM in September. So that's great. April 17th, I attended the Qualicum Beach Memorial Golf Course Board meeting before heading to Town Hall for Beach Day, and that's progressing along. I did make a pitch for it yesterday when we had some students attend the council chambers for a tour. So I was plugging both Family Day and Beach Day, and hopefully they'll get involved. On April 19th, I attended the RDN Solid Waste Committee meeting, and it actually wasn't discussed at that meeting, but in case people haven't heard, there will be a series of the pop-up recycle events in the Industrial Park in Parksville. And the first one is scheduled for May the 20th, and then it'll be twice a month from June to September. So perhaps we can post those or promote those on our website. April 22nd, in recognition of Earth Day, I picked up garbage along with Councillor Vander along Highway 19A. And on April 24th, Mayor Westbrook and I hosted the council open house. So we had one person attend, and they shared with us their preference for the comments from the public to be able to be made in person. Otherwise, they felt that there is limited access to some of those comments. They inquired as to why the names are now being redacted in the correspondence log, and in follow-up, we were advised that this is being done based on legal advice that was received by the town. They have some concerns about the correspondence process, although they stated that there has been a noticeable improvement. And finally, the town's website, and again, always room for improvement on that. On April 29th, I attended a climate film at St. Stephen's, and that was the third of a series of events in honor of Earth Month. So we not just have a day, we have a month now for our Earth. And then, as mentioned yesterday, Ms. Willer's grade 2 class from Qualicum Beach Elementary School came for a visit of Town Hall, and I think it was a good success. Thank you.
Thank you. And at that time, I rolled the first bull at the lawn bowling. And by the way, they look forward to us having a playoff between the Parksville Council and the Qualicum Beach Council at some point. Thank you. And I think those dates for pop-up for recycle, I definitely think that they should be on the on our website. Perhaps I think there should be a motion that they are to be posted on the website with the proper dates. So if you can pass on the dates when that happens and where to staff, then they can deal with that. Okay. If you make that as motion, I think that would be appropriate.
Okay, so I would like to move that the dates for the upcoming series of pop-up recycling events in Parksville be posted on the town's website.
Second, Councillor Harrison. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you, Councillor Skipsey. Councillor Vander.
Thank you. On the 17th of April, I was not available to attend the meeting of the St. Andrew's Lodge Board, but I have some of the information about what they did discuss. So the board expects to have the review from the Heritage Building engineer back by the end of May, and regarding their plans for the lodge restoration. The board, or the society I should say, has filed a proposal for a grant from BC Heritage and will have a federal legacy grant application filed by mid-month. They have received a grant from BC Festivals for the 17th of June celebration of what would be Elizabeth Little's 100th birthday, and that's going to be a gala event. And as we will discuss later when we're looking at the Saahtlam Park site plan, they have a request regarding the washrooms on the site. On the 20th of April, I attended a chauffeured tour of the town facilities at the Public Works Yard, the Parks Works Yard, and the Fire Hall to meet our staff and better understand the facilities and the great work that they do for all of us in the town. And that was very informative and really helped me to appreciate even more the work that they do for us. I also attended a meeting of the Oceanside Health and Wellness Network, and they are still working on a forum regarding housing. On the 26th of April, I attended the meeting of the board of the Parksville-Qualicum Beach Tourism Association, and a large part of the meeting was discussion of the problem of short-term rentals affecting the housing available for long-term rentals for employees. So that continues to be a very prominent difficulty for many people in many areas of our community. April 28th, I attended a meeting of the board of the Chamber of Commerce. We weren't able to discuss much in detail because they didn't have a quorum in attendance. And on May 2nd, I was fortunate to help for the tour with the grade 2 students in the town hall, and the excitement and energy of the grade 2s was lovely to see. We both Councillor Skipsey and I very much appreciate grade 2 teachers now. And that's about it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vander. Councillor Young.
Okay, I might be last, but I have lots. So it was National Volunteer Week, April the 16th to the 22nd, and I just have a lot to say because as the Art and Culture Liaison for this council this year, we have a lot of volunteer committees and organizations in our community, and they really help with the vibrancy and the resiliency of this community being a wonderful community. So they started off with, there was a SOS appreciation luncheon that was held last week, and our town crier attended to that and thanked so many volunteers in the SOS organization. We have TOSH, which is also run by volunteers, and they have something I'd like to read. They constantly have new showings and exhibits. And for the month of May, the Old Schoolhouse Art Center is celebrating 35 years of community-supported artistic expression. How fitting to mark this milestone with a show of gratitude, a 70-year retrospective of works by Cortez Island artist Hans Gross. And there's a quote that Ilana, the director, has mentioned in this. A painter does not produce just something beautiful. What you think and what you do float into the work. So terrible things must be countered by more than shallow images. They call for a meaningful reflection on perception, on a method that can help people to perceive their own world in a different way. I heard someone say that you can't change the world, but it is worth trying. It is the only world we have, and I will continue to try. And this is a quote from Hans Gross, the artist. And Ilana says, I too will just keep trying, and I think that's a great initiative for all of us to keep trying. They also have a wonderful Sunday music program regularly, but also for the month of May, they have a lounge night with Joni Taylor and Phil Dwyer on piano. Phil Dwyer is a local resident. He is a 3-time Juno Award winner, and it's just awesome that we have volunteers and a lot of talent in our community. So that is Saturday, May the 13th at 7:30 in the evening. Go check out the Tosh and enjoy an evening out. Also like to mention Oceanside Hospice, another organization run by volunteers. This week, May the 1st to the 7th, is the Tim Hortons Smile Cookie Campaign. I know Tim Hortons in Parksville. However, they have chosen Oceanside Hospice as their charity of choice. Last year, they donated $7,000 on the sale of their Smile cookies, and this year they're doing the same. And Oceanside Hospice is another wonderful organization for our community. We also have the KSS Fine Arts Society, which is spearheaded by Diane Callis, and they hosted their annual premiere performance of our KSS students last week. And that was another wonderful event to see, and how we're encouraging our the youth in our community to aspire to being more involved in arts and music and drama. Also, we also, the Broom Busters is also a volunteer organization, and again, it's amazing the volunteers we have and the good that they do. And it is spearheading for us to take care of fire hazards, and now it's getting recognition at the UBCM. We also have ALCO, which is the Early Learning Child Care Council for Oceanside, another volunteer organization, and it advocates access to quality and affordable early learning child care. And last Saturday, they hosted the Early Childhood Educators of BC Forum for Vancouver Island. And again, another volunteer organization, and we are really excited to see, hopefully in June, they have a director in place, and they have staff that they're hiring so that the daycare can open probably in June. And it's a wonderful daycare. Also, we have Qualicum Beach Rotary, which is another wonderful organization of volunteers. And on Earth Day, with collaboration of the town of Qualicum Beach, it was a cleanup last Saturday morning. And Qualicum Beach Rotary is always sponsoring many local events, like the Canadian Flag Program, which is to celebrate on 4 special Canadian occasions our pride in being Canadians, like Victoria Day, Canada Day, Labor Day, and Remembrance Day. So for $50, they will bring a flag to your house for a week on those 4 occasions. They also sponsor the premiere performance, and they also is currently sponsoring the Mindfulness in May, which is a youth art exposition featuring the theme of art nurturing nature, and it is currently showing at Adam Walker's office on 2nd Avenue, and that's running from May the 1st to the 13th. And that is spearheaded by Diane Moran, just doing volunteering and creating all events like this. And also, it was really nice on Monday night that our Mayor Westbrook and our CEO, Lou Varela, attended the Qualicum Beach Rotary dinner and thanked Rotary for all that they do in Qualicum Beach. And that's it.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Next, we have, there's a notice of motion that you have. You want to bring that forward?
I am going to just pass because it's been suggested that we can look at down the road.
We'll defer it to a future date.
Yes.
Thank you. And because it is a notice of motion, I think we should do that. Make the motion. I'll second it, and then I'll make a motion to defer it until the fall. So the motion to defer this recommendation to a fall time when we committed to having the tree protection bylaw reviewed. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Staff reports. Ms. Prella.
Your Worship, I'll hand that over to Corporate Administration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we have number of special event approvals, and we're asking that the following special event applications be approved in principle, subject to event organization working with town staff to ensure the requirements are met. And there's a list there before you on the screen and in your package.
We can take them all in one. Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Vander, discussion. All in favor? Opposed? If any, carried. Thank you. Financial Administration, Mr. Hare.
Your Worship, through you to Council, you have a staff report on a grant application for the Town of Qualicum Beach Asset Replacement Plan revision. So essentially we have in our strategic initiatives, we had a $30,000 provision for developing an asset management financing strategy. And subsequent to the preparation of the financial plan, we learned that the funding that is available had changed. We had an assumption 15% of the funding for that 30,000 provision would come from grant funds and 15% from the town funds, or from the Strategic Initiatives Reserve. So only 12,500 is available through the grant, so we're adjusting the provision to 27.5 with a grant application of 12.5, and we're looking for council approval to apply for that grant.
Yeah, so what's on the screen is actually not correct. The number needs to be changed to 12,500. And further, council supports a willingness to provide overall grant management. Could I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Harrison?
Moved as amended.
Councillor Young, seconding. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you, Mr. Hare. Fire Rescue. Chief Cornell.
Thank you. Before I use the grant, wishing council's approval on a grant application for a FireSmart grant. This will be for the Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan, as well as fuel management plans for the 2 key parks and FireSmart education.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison?
So moved.
Councillor Young, seconding. In favor? Further discussion? Councillor Harrison. Councillor Skipsey.
Thank you. Just as the liaison to the Heritage Forest, I'd just like to note that, well, first of all, I think it's great that this is coming forward, and it was definitely identified as a #1 priority for climate adaptation plan by the last council, that we look at doing this. But I will just note that with the Heritage Forest, it will take some consultation with the Brown Property Preservation Society and the Land Conservancy, because we have a 3-way partnership with them. But it also works both ways, like the surrounding community, perhaps there's things that they can do to take risks to reduce the fire of spreading into the forests. So I think this is a good initiative, and I look forward to seeing more.
Thank you. So further discussion? Councillor Harrison?
Just because I'm not aware of everything that's happening at the RDN table, have there been any discussions about fire breaks in rural areas or ways to sort of make sure that a fire doesn't spread too far?
Not that I've been at, no, but I think it's a good point. We went to a conference a few years ago, Councillor Avers and I, at the, I think Councillor Skipsey was with us in Winnipeg. And anyway, we heard about how the best way to avoid fires coming into the city. And Councillor Avers was quite excited because, you know, it's a scary thing. And they said, what you have to do, you have to take a great strip of trees around your city and cut them all down, because then the fire won't spread. So I thought, well, that's kind of brutal, but it probably works in their situation. Anyway, further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Planning, Mr. Sales.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Westbrook. Next item on the agenda addresses the Saahtlam Park Detailed Park Plan. This is an item that was identified by council as a strategic initiative, and it's a follow-up to the previous conceptual design that was done several years ago. Ms. Gould, if you could just pull up a few slides. So, as I mentioned, the property was explored after the town purchased it as to what types of uses should be included on the property and what the character should be. So there was quite an extensive visioning process that took place. However, at the time that that visioning process happened, there was not yet a decision as to whether the lodge was going to be retained. So obviously since that time, there's been extensive discussion. That kind of fundamental key decision as to the lodge has been made. So at this time, it would be appropriate to take the conceptual work and hone it down into a single detailed park plan that would have details on issues such as if there's a washroom, where the washroom would go, exactly which amenities would be constructed, and give you a more detailed timeline and cost estimate. So just taking the conceptual work, turn it into an actual actionable plan. So next slide, if you would. Just for everyone's reference, it has been a few years. So this is the general concept for it. When you see a plan and all the shapes are bubbles, it means it's conceptual, because those are the general locations of the types of things to be explored in detail later on. So the orange one near the bottom, that's the lodge. The action item coming out of that was to explore the feasibility of retaining the lodge, for example. So then there's some of the other bubbles are related to potential washroom locations, natural playground, and the conceptual plan does envision a footpath of natural walkways going through the site and then down onto the foreshore. So that's just for everyone's reference. The complete plan is available on the town's website if you want to refresh as to exactly what was discussed in that plan. It's actually very, very well done. And next slide. So the recommendation before you today is that a consultant be identified to undertake the detailed plan for Saahtlam Park using the process identified in the planning memo. The one point I would make is that the staff recommendation is that the proposals be reviewed by staff and that selection be made without a future council report. And that is just because of the timing. We are heading into the summer season, so if council is going to select a consultant, it likely wouldn't be until midway into June, so limited opportunities for public engagement. So the recommendation is that staff would review the proposals and make that selection. However, the council does have as alternative one the option to retain that selection, and then it would be brought back for a meeting in June. I should also note that there was discussion about a potential commitment to washrooms. And so if council does want to ensure that the detailed park plan includes washrooms, that is identified as another alternative in your memo. So that would be supplementary to the main decision as to whether to proceed with the RFP. So you could decide proceed with the RFP, bring it back to council, and make sure there's a washroom in it, or you can mix and match various alternatives there. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Councillor Vander, earlier in your statements, you mentioned you had something about this particular item.
Yes, thank you. I think I have a couple of questions. The conceptual plan that you had on the screen, was that the final conceptual plan that you will be working from? So you're not redoing the work that you've already done? Is that?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Vander Valk. The idea is to build on the public engagement that was done at that time. So not to repeat the public engagement, but there were some items that weren't really decided with certainty. So there would be additional public engagement, definitely, that would be a requirement of this process. So taking the concept and actually turn it into details on the ground. So we're not looking to toss this out and redo it. We're looking to just rebuild on it or build on it and add clarity.
Okay, because you have two key plans in the plan that's on the website. You have option A, key plan, and option B, key plan. And option A, I'm assuming, is no longer on the table because the lodge is not there. So I assume that we would be looking more at option B as the key plan. And that plan does, I just want to make sure that that plan is looking more at the natural sort of a natural solution to what will be in the park as opposed to a plastic solution. So I don't know how to say that succinctly, but it seems to me that in terms of the preliminary concept options that you have on those key plans, that's the overall approach. So there's that. And also, I would like to make an amendment to your alternative 2. So I'm not sure how
Right,
to.
if we can have the motion back the way we first started off at the meeting, to have a more, basically, next step move, is that what you want to start with, Councillor Harris, Councillor Vander?
Yes, when we're looking at the alternatives, I think
Yes,
it's.
but let's do the first one, do this first, and then we'll look at the alternatives.
Okay,
All right? So I have a motion to that effect.
okay, I'll move to that.
Councillor Vander Valk, Councillor Harrison, discussion on that. Councillor Skipsey.
Well, I would just hope that the staff take into consideration the knowledge that the original consultant has on this project when they're considering the RFPs. And also, I do appreciate the more natural solution, although I would like to say that the little paved pathway has been utilized by people in wheelchairs. I'm aware of somebody that was able to have their pictures taken with, for their daughter's wedding, and they were only able to be in that setting because of that access. So I hope that we keep accessibility top of mind.
Thank you. I think accessibility is a major issue now as we are looking to have an accessibility part of our committees that we're bound to strike. So we'll work with that. So on this particular item, Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, and to Councillor Skipsey's point, I think it's actually now the provincial government has basically told us as a local government, you have to have accessibility considered, which is actually a really good thing, to your point, because I know both my parents use walkers, and I remember someone was saying this narrow sort of woody path with roots all through it, why don't you just use that? I'm like, neither of my parents can walk through that, that's why. The one question I'd have through staff is, the issue of parking on this other side of the street, because I'm assuming we're still operating under the assumption there won't be enough parking on the park side. That would be something that maybe staff could do on their own. It wouldn't be included in this funding.
No, well, that's certainly something that needs to be explored, you know, the amount of parking, the location of the parking. So it probably wouldn't be within the immediate scope, but if the consultant was able to provide recommendations as to, you know, whether the land across the street should be utilized for parking, that would be appropriate. The conceptual plan did include some parking across the street, so I think that it's reasonable to say that there would be discussion about it, whether or not they have absolute clarity on what that would look like.
I would agree, both on the accessibility issue and parking. Those are key points to be addressed. So that's on this particular recommendation. Are you ready for the question on that? All in favor? Motion carries. And Councillor Vander Valk, you had an alternative?
Yes, so for alternative 2, I think it's really important to the St. Andrew's Lodge Society that we make a decision about the inclusion of a washroom, but I find that the alternative that we have, that staff have provided, I don't think it's specific enough. I would prefer to see one where we say where and what kind of washrooms are going to be on the site, not just that there will be washrooms on the site. So I would like to have that alternative read that council directs staff to require the inclusion of one universal accessible washroom in the lodge and one universal accessible washroom outside the lodge.
I'll second that. Further discussion. Councillor Vander Valk?
Well, just that I think that we do need to make a decision, and as there is already a washroom in the lodge, that we can use the plumbing that's there. It will be much easier and much more accessible and much less expensive to do that. So, and I think would be more fair to the society for us to get moving a little more moving, period, on this question, and that certainly will help them in terms of what they are planning for the lodge.
Okay, through staff, from a layman's perspective, it makes sense to use existing water and sewer lines that are already onto the building. Ms. Little in the lodge had several washrooms, so I think the capacity should be there. How does that work as far as archaeological difficulty and construction-wise to hook up 2 washrooms back to back, one inside, one outside, universal, like we have in the fire hall? Would that be a possibility?
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook and Councillor Vandervalk. So just for clarity, what I'm understanding from the discussion is when Councillor refers to external washrooms, you mean externally accessible washrooms, so there's an outside door, but the intention is to include it as a part of the building itself? Is that what I'm hearing, or were you saying that one of them would be detached? No, okay. So in terms of the archaeological, there is an assessment, a preliminary assessment that's underway. A consultant has already been engaged for that, so the results of that have not yet been received, and that would have implications as to the exact steps of installing new lines or whatnot. The one comment I would make about the capacity of the existing lines, certainly there were multiple washrooms on the site in the little cabins. A number of them had individual services out, and it wouldn't be fair to assume that new services are not required, because the size of services that were installed, when the lodge was constructed, are maybe not meeting current standards for sizes. So then locating a washroom inside the existing facility may not completely eliminate the need to install new service lines.
I understand. Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
I do think it's very important that there's clarity on this issue for the society as soon as possible, but I'd suggest that sometimes renovation is actually more expensive than new construction, and it can be a lot more expensive. And I think one of the reasons that our last foray as a town, just before my time on council, into washrooms was the waterfront washrooms, where we were renovating, I believe, existing washrooms, and then the price tag was a lot more than people were expecting. It might be a good idea to have Councillor Vandervalk's option as one option, and then 2 washrooms external altogether as another option, and just saying, here's the relative cost of each and the impacts, because I honestly don't know if 2 external washrooms might be significantly as expensive or significantly more expensive. There's a lot of issues about, essentially the servicing of the washrooms that I'm not up to speed on. And I just think it might be good when we get that report to have 2 options to present to the public, and then we'll go with the one that works best for everyone. I wouldn't want to say that the option of using St. Andrew's Lodge is the wrong option, because I don't know. But I just think to make that decision now when we don't have all the information on the costs might be a bit peremptory. Might be good to have the 2 options in the report, and then we can make a decision subsequently.
Thank you. Any further discussion? And Ms. Svensson, did you get the wording of the motion?
Yes, I would like to repeat it to make sure we're
Okay,
on the same
go
page.
ahead.
So that council directs staff to require the inclusion of 1 universal accessible washroom in the St. Andrew's Lodge building and 1 universal accessible washroom outside the St. Andrew's Lodge building as one of the assumptions in the development of a detailed park plan for Saahtlam Park.
What were the first 3 words of that?
Council directs staff to require the inclusion of 1 universal accessible washroom in the St. Andrew's Lodge building and 1 universal accessible washroom outside the St. Andrew's Lodge building as one of the assumptions.
Okay. I just wanted the beginning of the term wording, because what this motion says is that we're asking staff to come back and say, here's what it would look like and here's what it would cost. At least that's what I would expect. Now we'd get a plan working with the society to see how we can make this work. So I don't want to say this is it. If it's impossible, we can't ask for the impossible. But I think it's the direction that we prefer at this point to go. So if the motion could be amended that we ask staff for a report on getting this done this way, I think that would be prudent.
So if the mover of the motion, I could change it to say that council directs staff to provide a report on the possibilities of the inclusion of a one universal outside and inside? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, it depends how soon we can have that report, because things have been in hold mode for quite a while, so.
We're struggling with the time it's taking, and it's been a long time. We bought this property in 2018, and we're looking to see some action, basically. And we know we need washrooms, and from our layman's perspective, that seems like the way to go. The plumbing is already there, water line is there. It helps with fixing the structure and that side of the property and the building. So, but if it's not possible, we don't want to ask for what's not possible. But we certainly would prefer, if it is possible, to go down that route. And yes, it will cost money, but like we said, when we fixed the old washrooms at the beach, I think it was close to $400,000. So and we had to have showers, we had to do a lot of work there, which at that time I didn't agree with, actually, the way it was done. But in this case, I think what we're trying to say is, let's get some movement. Let's get something back and say, okay, the decision on the washroom is made. One inside, one outside, universal, accessible. Can we get that going? That's really what we're saying. So, Ms. Rella.
Thank you, Your Worship. So respectfully, staff do serve at the pleasure of council. I think including this in the strategic priorities and prioritizing this within the 2023 work plan is the action and the direction that staff needed to undertake next steps. Again, while things often look like they take a lot of time from the outside, I think it's important that we do due diligence, such as servicing, other potential constraints, the archaeological permit, and those pieces of due diligence are often what isn't outward facing for council or the community. So just acknowledging that staff are working as per council direction, and we're listening today for next steps. Again, acknowledging that due diligence does take time, and we will be reporting back transparently on what the possibilities and constraints can be.
All right, Councillor Skipsey.
I'm just wondering if there's any ballpark as to the timing, because that is a concern, I think, for the society and from what I heard around the council table.
Yes, thank you. So I can report on the timing of the overall planning process for the Saahtlam Park Plan. So as mentioned earlier, the intention is to identify a consultant as quickly as possible so that they would have an opportunity to do some consultation in June prior to the summer months. And then during the summer months, have less formal opportunities for public engagement. The early fall, so September, would likely see some larger group meetings, and the plan would be adopted in October. So that's the general timeline for the finalization of the park plan as we're currently proposing it. Now, as Ms. Varela said, staff do serve at the pleasure of council. It certainly is feasible to include washrooms inside the building. There are cost implications, access implications, there's nuances. However, if council is committed to that location, staff and the consultant will find ways to make it work. So the reason that staff didn't preemptively include that as an assumption was that there is some discussion in the conceptual plan as to the merits of having it inside or outside, and there are benefits and drawbacks to both. However, this is council's decision, and if council allocates the resources to put the washroom in the building and provides that direction, then staff and the consultant will follow through. Thank you.
Thank you, because the motion that you prepared, or that was written out, clearly makes a decision. There's no longer, well, we haven't decided yet. If we pass this, the decision will actually be made. Sometimes it's good to make a decision and actually provide some clarity on this thing. So I would be voting in favor of having one inside universally accessible washroom and one outside accessible from the outside universally accessible washroom. I'm in favor of that. And I think what I'm hearing is the majority may be in favor of that. So we want to make a decision, and we have to make a decision. We haven't made a decision on this for a long time, and I think it is time. And we all know we need washrooms, and that's one good location to have it. So I'm supporting the motion as you presented. Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, well, I was going to support the amendment, but if you're going to go back to the original, I won't be supporting this. Principally because renovating older buildings is very, very, very expensive. It is not a cheap endeavor by any means. And to not have two options before us, or even just, here's a report on the costs, are you okay with the costs? To essentially commit to spending the money without even knowing how much money we're going to spend, I don't think that's good governance. I think that's the wrong way to do things. I think it's better to get a report saying, here are the expected costs, then we know what we're getting into. And if we have an, oh my gosh, I didn't realize it would cost this much money moment, we can then readjust. But if we're committed to the course of action before we know the costs, we're running the risk of having a very, very expensive project, which was supposed to be quick and easy. And when people compare the cost of the two different washrooms, this one's 80,000, this one's become 250,000 suddenly. They'll ask, why didn't you just do 2 for 80? So no, I won't be supporting making a choice without understanding how much we actually have to spend.
Further discussion? All in favor? Sorry. Oh, Councillor Young.
Well, maybe we can just start with one washroom on the outside, because it's just important to have a washroom in that area. So start with one, and then we don't have to worry about renovating the building right away. Just.
Councillor Ms. Svensson, you had your hand up?
Yes, please. I just would like clarity. Are we going with require the inclusion or provide a report on the inclusion? Those are the two discussion options, and I want to be clear on the motion. Councillor Vander Valk.
I would like it to stand as I first presented it. Requiring.
Okay, thank you.
So further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Harrison opposed. Thank you. So I think we have one other item. From planning, Mr. Sales.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. The next item on the agenda is the development variance permit for a proposed structure at 307 Crescent Road West. I do have a few slides on this one. This is a proposal to vary the minimum setback from Poplar, which is considered a road in the town's zoning bylaw, and therefore would have a minimum setback of 8 meters. However, as you are aware, that the width of Poplar is actually closer to that of a laneway. It just happens to be a roadway designated in the zoning bylaw. So the proposal is to vary the minimum setback on Poplar from 8 meters to 3 meters to facilitate the construction of an accessory dwelling unit at this location. This is a development variance permit, so the first step is council consideration determining whether council wishes to proceed to the point of public notification and consideration at the next meeting. Staff do recommend that this proceed to the next step and that notification be provided for the next council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a recommendation. Would someone move the recommendation? Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Young, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you. And there's one last item, which is the skate park feasibility study tender award. The town received 2 proposals, and the choice between the 2 is relatively straightforward. One was more expensive, and it's a qualified applicant, but they are located in a different province, and therefore their costs were much higher because of the transportation requirements. The preferred proponent, which is New Line Skate Parks, has extensive experience in the area. They've visited the skate park and had discussions with the local skate group. So staff do recommend proceeding with New Line Skate Parks for a total of $15,500 plus GST. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Harrison, discussion? Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, I think we're actually really fortunate right now that the stars have sort of aligned, because I remember when the skate shop moved into downtown, just talking to the owners when they first moved in about this is something we might be able to do. And there's a lot of connections we have now, both within people who are members of the skating community and also some people in the business community. So this is, we're very fortunate. We're very lucky to have that.
Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. And I think that concludes the business for the open meeting. Have I forgotten anything? No? Okay.
Motion to close?
So a motion to close would be appropriate. Councillor Harrison, Councillor Skipsey, we are closed. We'll take a 5-minute recess and we'll continue with the in-camera portion. Thank you.
Lunch will be here in 5.
And may I be so bold to suggest that you have conversations in the lobby so we can continue?